We ready? Welcome one and all to Object Podcast, the game dev podcast featuring members of the game maker community. My name is Gabe, otherwise known as Lazy Eye, and today joining me as my co-host is Masetta and Seabass. And joining us as our guest is Grog. Everyone, welcome to Object Podcast.
Hey.
Grog, you and I have known each other for a while. You're pretty involved in the GM community. So I'm going to open up with a big one here. Your game, Fiend Tower. First off, what got you started with it? Like, what made you want to start this project?
Fiend Tower itself specifically?
Yeah, like way back when you first had the idea, what was the drive there?
So initially I was working on a game called Dash and Atlas, and that was kind of, I've been making games for, air quotes, making games as a hobbyist since the year 2000 technically, but things didn't really kind of come together until Dash and Atlas. That's kind of where I learned to pixel art and code and all this sort of stuff.
Back then, we're using GM still?
Oh God, no. A little bit here and there, but I started with RPG Maker.
Yeah. Beautiful. Great.
Yep,
That's
awesome.
how everyone gets started in GM.
For the PlayStation 1, just to be clear.
Oh, good. So that you could share with the memory stick.
You got it.
Can we touch on the making games air quotes?
Well, I mean, like as 0.5% Final Fantasy or Dragon Ball Z fan game made an RPG Maker considered game dev?
Yeah.
But that's what I mean,
it's a
right?
Different level of game dev. I still count it.
But I mean, if I'd gone somewhere, even if I'd finished something or been close, or I wasn't competent at it, right? I was figuring stuff out. There wasn't YouTube back then. Things were a lot harder. My skill set didn't come together. I would try and kind of fail and not really know how to improve things.
I think what he's saying is it was a time when he was learning how to do game dev, but he wasn't necessarily a game dev or doing game development. He was more just grasping at straws at the time.
Yeah, I was
playing around, discovering
like
things.
12 or whatever. It's a big thing, the difference between then and, now that YouTube's out and stuff, like what's out there for people to learn.
You can literally search any topic, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So with Dash and Atlas, there's a handful of different kind of things that came together at once, like just different videos and resources that kind of kickstarted my skill basically in both pixel art and coding. That kind of just had never happened before.
Right.
It's not one of those things where, I've been practicing since the year 2000 and, honed my craft. It's like, no, my skill set probably started really developing in like 2014, 15.
Mm-hmm.
So in December 2017, I think it was, for whatever reason, me and my buddy Ghostly Feline, he's a member in, he's in and out of the Game Maker Discord.
Right.
We decided to do kind of just like a week-long jam game together, and that ended up being released on itch.io as Tower Game.
I've heard about this. Okay, right.
Yeah. So we worked on this game for a week. It was kind of refreshing. This was actually right when this happened. I think I started using Asprite for this project. Like, this is the project I learned to use Asprite for.
Right.
So, I did the art, he did the code. But he was working on another project as well. So we finished and we're both kind of happy with it. And he moved on, continued working on with his other project. I asked if he wanted to keep working on Tower Game. But he wasn't able to, or, he was working on his other project. So I decided to keep working on it. At this time, Game Maker Studio 2 came out. So I recoded, basically, I coded it the way I would have coded it. Not saying there's anything wrong with how he did it. It's just, I wanted to do it myself. So the physics and the mechanics, like before, it was just, a range game. You only had throwing shurikens. We had melee combat and stuff like that. So from there, I decided, I guess the short story of it is I was really tired of working on Dash and Atlas, which was a giant Metroidvania. And I wanted something much smaller in scope, which is what Fiend Tower was.
Okay. Leading into that, you do code and art, which is not always commonplace in the development world.
Right.
What led you to doing both? I mean, I understand you started with RPG Maker, and I get that, the concept of I had no one else, so I learned to do everything.
Right.
But I was in the same position. I never learned art because I'm terrible at art. What switched you from just game development to both those fields and being as good at both of them as you are?
So I guess the big thing for me was because I would always try stuff Seabass, have you ever tried pixel art or tried to just do it and like failed, or you just keep
There's some publicly available Twitter images of an older version of some of my games.
You should see Don't Sink before they brought Daniel onto the project.
There's a certain charm to my art.
I knew you were about to say that. It has its own charm.
It's not good, but it has a charm. It's like a coffee shop with cockroaches, but it's like family owned, so you kind of feel bad. It's like
a coffee shop with cockroaches. Oh man. That's oddly accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So
right,
for me,
so,
I guess
yeah, go ahead.
A big thing for me, and this is kind of how I feel about anything. Like I find I don't like the word talented. Like sometimes people will say I'm talented, and I don't mean that in a way where I'm like trying to whatever compliment myself. But
I mean naturally blessed. You're not.
I don't like that word talented because like literally nothing comes easy for me. I have to like grind at everything,
Right.
which is why I try to be really helpful in the community, because a lot of things I've found that works for me, I find just in dealing with others that works for them. There's really simple things that aren't really difficult to do that can just really improve your skills, basically. So Dash and Atlas was inspired by Blaster Master. So what I basically did was for the first time in my life, I like really tried to reference it. I'm like, what made me like Blaster Master's graphics? And I tried to replicate it. So I was using references. And I can show you...
And that's another Metrovania game, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
and I can show you my original mock-up of that game. It was horrible, like just does not look good. You can see, I can send you a screenshot of my original mock-ups, and then like the day after I first tried using DB32 as a palette, and the art difference is just clear as day. So like a simple thing I learned for myself to improve as an artist is use a palette. I know it's kind of a meme on the Discord now, on r/GameMaker, but if you're learning pixel art and you're struggling and like you're just not having a good time, pick a palette. Pick DB32, Edge 32, ARN 32, just a palette. There's a lot of resources available on lowspec.com. A lot of good palettes out there, and that's been a huge
Are there
help
palettes
for me.
that look good that you don't recommend?
Palettes that what?
Like are there palettes that everyone just like immediately goes to, are really common, but you're like, don't touch those?
No, to be honest, I don't. I mostly work with DB32. It's kind of almost a crutch. I'm actually working on my own palette right now. It's kind of in its early to mid stages, but yeah. So usually palettes will come with like resources with them. You can kind of look and see what's been created with them.
Right.
Sprite has a lot of built-in palettes that you kind of can't go wrong with. I mean, you can. There's some that are kind of very specific cases, but they all have their purpose.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So for art, the main thing you would recommend then is picking a color palette and then just going for it, and then having references.
There's a lot more to it than that, and we can go into that if you want. But like that was like one of the biggest things that like like I said, I've been doing pixel art, as a hobby intermittently through RPG Maker and Game Maker, and when I was doing a computer science class in grade 10. But it was always garbage. It was always like I didn't know how to improve, and there's always just problems, right? But those were the two things that really jumpstart.
Would you say art for you though, that was the kind of thing where it's just if you do it enough times, you got better at it? Because I mean, you even have animations now, which is not something a low tier pixel artist starts doing.
Right. So with that, like I actually think it's a misnomer when people just say keep practicing, because just practicing doesn't necessarily do anything. Like if you keep just doing the same thing over and over again, like some people I'm just going to keep drawing a face, and it's like maybe
you need to make mistakes and see those mistakes, right?
Well, seeing the mistakes is the important part, right? So if you draw a face and you're like, why doesn't this look right? And then you look up a picture of a face and you're like, oh, well, the eyes go here and this should be like this and this should be like this.
Right.
It makes a huge difference, right? So, just even studying, looking up references, learning from people who have done things before you. There's a lot of really good resources. My favorite, one of the things I learned in art, after I'd finally kind of figured out what worked for me and what I used to kind of help people pick up pixel art, I ended up finding all the basically the things that I've learned in this one single video called the 7 Habits of like a highly effective artist. So if anybody's interested, it's so key. It's just 7 tips that are all essential to improving, I find.
That is very good advice. I've never actually had solid pixel art advice, so thank you.
I'm curious to hear more about, because you've mentioned that a big turning point for you and actually starting to learn pixel art was using a reference. And I've noticed, and I'm sure you have as well, that a lot of people are understandably turned off by the idea of using a reference.
Right.
Because for a lot of people, I see 2 common answers. One is I know what this looks like. Why would I need to look at a picture of it? And the other common answer is, I don't want to copy someone, though. I want to make my own original thing with creativity.
Right.
And I think after trying to use a reference more, you can start to see that there are things that you forget about when you're looking at a reference, and there are clear improvements you can make by using one. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're copying. So I'm curious to hear what your process is a little bit about how you use a reference to not copy but be inspired by things more.
Right. So a big thing, one of the things I recommend, and Twitter is really good for this. If you're in the game dev community, I really recommend Twitter. It's super nice. But basically, it doesn't have to be Twitter. What I recommend is having an inspiration and reference folder. Something just, if you see pixel art you like, if there's a game you like, go to Spreader's Resource, copy the pixel art you like, throw it in a folder. Or if you're on Twitter, just follow a bunch of pixel artists and like everything you see. And eventually, if sometimes I'm just uninspired or bored or don't know what I want to do, or maybe I saw like a tweet 2 weeks ago on how to do really cool bricks, and I want to start doing bricks. It's like I have this reference library handy for me to just kind of scroll through and see stuff that already exists. In terms of using references, pixel art is in a very unique position, and this is why I think it's a lot more accessible than literally any other medium. There's literally no dexterity involved. Like I guess you have to use a mouse, which is you don't have to use the mouse well. You just have to be able to move a mouse and click. That's the only dexterity involved in pixel art. You don't have to be able to do like clean, confident lines. You don't have to be able to, do anything that would be physically dexterous, like when you draw or paint, right? So with pixel art, you can open up somebody's art that looks great, and you can zoom in and you can see pixel by pixel. What did they do to make it great? And I would even recommend, what I do sometimes is I'll just open up somebody's art and I'll copy it. Like I'll eyeball it and see what they did and be like, okay, cool, I kind of get how they're using this. And then I save that and show it, or like you either save it or throw it away, but you don't really show that to somebody. That's your practice time. When it comes time to actually reference for something you want to use in a product, load up, well, you should have been doing this the whole time, kind of developing your skills, but if you load up, let's say, 10 artists' work you like, and maybe you like how this guy does the eyes, so you want to try something similar, but you really like the shading technique of this person, and then this guy, the way he does his outlines is really unique, and you want to try that.
You're talking about developing a style.
Yeah, so exactly, yeah. So people, the worst thing a beginner can say is, oh, well, I want to develop my own style. I want to find my own style. I don't want to copy somebody else. Most people's style, unless you're naturally gifted at art, which I think is a misnomer. I think most people aren't. I think most of the time it's just you've been drawing so damn long. You were a kid drawing. You don't realize that you've been putting in the work your whole life.
It's hard to be bad when you've done it your entire life.
Exactly, right? Your style comes with, the practice you've done and from referencing other people's stuff, and then you are infusing, like, just naturally by kind of doing the stuff, you'll be infusing your own style into it and kind of coming up with a style. But it's not something you should worry about up front.
Let me lead this into your Twitch stream that you do.
Right.
So first off, to clarify, you stream twice a week.
Twice a week, yep.
And how long have you been doing this?
I started, I think, in late March. I kind of been streaming
of this year.
Of this year, yeah.
Why do I feel like you've been streaming way longer? I feel like I saw you in 2017.
I would intermittently stream, like, here and there. It'd be like one day a week, and then I wouldn't stream for like 3 months. Like, I wouldn't call myself a streamer. I didn't have an overlay set up. I had no.
You were just sharing what you were doing.
I was just, let's try this. I was super awkward. I wasn't putting in the work.
Okay.
It wasn't like a thing I was doing. Whereas now I would say I'm actually a streamer. Right? It's something I'm doing consistently and putting in the work into getting better at, etc.
How's that been for you from a development standpoint, both in how you can work while streaming and how it's benefited you?
The cool thing about streaming is you're kind of doing stuff you'd already do at a much slower pace initially, but as you get better, you can kind of start doing, both, because streaming does take up its own kind of thought process while you're doing it. Yeah, it does. It's its own. It requires attention, right? So it's kind of a lot of people think, oh, well, you're just doing what you've already been doing or would have already been doing, but it's more than that.
Would you recommend it though to like other developers that haven't been marketing themselves? Do you think Twitch is a good route to take, or are you like, no, not worth?
It's hard to say. I think it works for some people. It's definitely its own. It's its own beast, right? It's not like you should do it if you want to do it. You don't have to do it. Like, it's not something that all developers should do. I like it because I can hone my presentation skills, like how I display myself on stream, the stream itself, the overlays. It's been a great experience for me just getting better at talking, just kind of filling the air, like trying to be thoughtful with how I talk.
Social skills in general,
exactly.
Right? With that environment. Yeah, it's a really unique social situation to maintain for hours on end weekly.
Right. It was really interesting. At where I work, I do like phone support. They asked me to train a group of people. It was like a teletraining, basically. I was over, webcam and microphone, basically, training a group of 11 people. And after I finished, my bosses were like, you were doing really good at filling the air. Like, that was actually really impressive.
Did you fire up the Twitch stream and get them to join you?
just gotta hustle when you can. But yeah, it was because I had been spending the past month or 2 days a week just practicing talking and kind of just filling the air. Sounds bad because sometimes everybody knows the stereotype of the YouTuber. What's up, everyone? This is Grog here. We're at it again with the smash the likes, and you don't want to be that kind of filling the air, but still like talking and giving
being
useful information.
Charismatic and keeping the conversation rolling.
So you feel like this is more of a sort of develop your personal skills as well as market yourself and your product? Exactly.
For me, streaming is incredibly valuable because I'm developing, my audience, building my community. That's been a big one. I have a Discord server for my stream in Fiend Tower, and it went from being literally one person just for like almost a year to being, we have about 60 people right now, which is not too bad. And that's just from starting.
That's pretty good. That's really good. Yeah.
I wanted to comment on that. Actually, I noticed your Discord is scarily active compared to any Discords I'm a part of.
It is.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, it's a really good thing. Yeah, it means people care enough to post there, and they feel that there's validation in doing that, which means they feel a social presence there, and that's
You're also
really good. That's powerful.
Kind of working out the whole community management art, because it's not just a Discord to post notifications when you're going live or post updates. I mean, if I just look at it real quick, you have channels for art critique, for game dev discussion, for feedback, for updates in your game. Voice channels. It really is its own proper community. And it is like really active.
I was actually really surprised. Like the first day I went live as a Twitch affiliate, somebody subbed me. It was actually Do Kill You. He's a member of the r/GameMaker Discord, and I was just really surprised. And slowly but surely, or not even, to be honest, not that slowly. Like, it's only been since March I've grown a small but nice and friendly and helpful community, and it's been nice.
Consistency, it does that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say you'd be surprised, but you really shouldn't be.
I'm interested to hear in how you felt that the journey for you was in kind of being an entertainer. Because I don't know if you're necessarily would consider yourself a more extroverted or introverted person, but streaming is, especially with a face cam and everything, like, you're really putting yourself in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
And especially you often stream alone. Like, it's up to you to keep everything moving and to be like a host in front of a bunch of people. Was that something that you felt was easy at first to you, or was it something you had to grow into?
No, it was incredibly difficult. I'm a super awkward mix of incredibly reserved initially, but also extremely open at the same time. Right. I'm poker face most of the time. Like, I'm usually not the first person to engage anything, but like, if I'm, if I know people at a party, or if I'm, out there or whatever, I can be like, air quotes, the life of the party. Like, I'm super loud. Like,
I can vouch for this from our friendship.
Yeah. You got it. So yeah, no, it was incredibly difficult because I had to kind of get over that reserve, just that natural, like, just that, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. How are you? Just like the natural kind of like closed loop of responses where it's like, oh no, I have to engage.
Was there something specific you did that helped, or do you honestly just think it was a matter of repetition and getting comfortable with it?
And did it involve alcohol?
The repetition helped. Once I get in the groove of things, like if I'm talking about something I'm passionate about, like if I'm talking about some system or why, a level's designed poorly in like Fiend Tower, like why this level sucks, why this level's good, or if I'm going through a pixel art piece, I'm like, oh, this, if I hit on a groove of something that really kind of, I just don't even have to think about it. I already know what I want to say. It just kind of comes out naturally.
Feels right, yeah.
A big thing, and this is a little bit of a cheat, but with Twitch you have to do whatever you can. The first few streams, when you get, you're fluctuating in between 0 to like 4 people, it's really rough. You're focusing on that 0, right? So I'd literally just send my links out to a handful of friends and just be like, hey, I don't care if you watch. I just want that number to not be 0.
Right.
And even just getting your number above 0 is a huge help, because there's so many just 0 viewers. So just getting that up there
Right.
helps get other people in there, and then those people who are actually there start talking. And then, once that number's not 0, I can start talking without feeling like I'm talking to nobody.
Once you're in the 5+, 10+ zone, yeah.
Yeah, I hardly ever stream, but on the few times that I have, it's like soul crushing when you're jumping between like 1 and 0, and because there's the delay, you can't just start talking when someone joins, and you have to keep talking. You just feel like you're completely talking to a brick wall, and that can be
100%.
really, really tough.
That can even be negative. I've joined streams where the guy's just having a full-on soliloquy by himself, and I'm like, this is cringy bad, because
Yeah.
I know I'm the
that's
only viewer
tough.
that's been in here, because I'm looking at the chat and it's been empty for like 45 minutes. So, oh man, this poor guy.
Yeah.
And that's what people recommend. Like, just talk like you have viewers. Don't pay attention to the numbers. Just go at it. And there's good ways and bad ways of doing it. Once again, back to the YouTube, typical person. Same thing
Right.
on Twitch, right? But what really worked for me was just, like I said, it doesn't even have to be a lot. Just a couple of friends in there. Just people who are going to make the count not 0.
Let me bandwagon this into the next question, which goes back to your game more, and this will lead to something else even bigger. But what's your plan for Fiend Tower long term? It seems like you're about midway, maybe past midway through the core development of the game.
Yeah, it's kind of hard with games to tell, right? Especially when you're doing. The word just came to me: iterative design.
Yeah,
I was trying to find the
Right,
word
right.
pre-stream about how I'm not doing a design document or anything. I'm kind of just
Right.
working with the game and see how it kind of comes out.
Yeah, as you're inspired, making changes.
Exactly, right. So I guess my main goal is I'm polishing up. I want to make essentially a feature-complete Zone 1 demo of the game. It's basically what would be the full game up until Zone 1. I want that to be complete so people know exactly what they're getting, just like a really well-polished experience. I want to make sure that's really tight. And then my goal is maybe 8 months to a year, maybe more, depending on how things work. Because I am working 40 hours full-time I work IT, basically, phone support. So it's now finding time in between that. I hope to come out with a Kickstarter, not even an excessive amount of money, but just something to basically, because I would estimate the whole game, I was hoping to be able to do a feature-complete game, feature-complete early access game in like 6 months. A year total, I should say.
Right.
And I'm about 6 months of dev in.
So I see, that window's there for you.
So the context of this is I was actually in a car accident in 2015, and I was actually off work for a good chunk of time. So when I started Fiend Tower, I was basically off work, and I had more or less 5-6 months of development time on it. June of last year, I started full time at a job, and had issues with that, going from not working to start working with. It was
shift.
basically concussion symptoms, basically. So for the first 2 to 3 weeks, I would come home and literally just lie in my bed in the dark. After about 3 weeks, I would do that, but I'd listen to audiobooks. So like I'd literally come to work and come home from work and do nothing, right? So that's kind of where the hiatus came from, of the 6 months of really solid dev time to not a lot of dev. And then just recently, I've been really I'm finally in the swing of things. I've been coding consistently in Fiend Tower, so I'm excited to be back into that.
That's good to hear. I'm going through a similar process, I feel like. I think not as severe, but definitely, coming home from work and just being completely out of it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, especially if your job completely drains you and you expect yourself to come home and have the motivation and energy to pour into game development, which is not like a brainless task. That's a lot to
Yeah, 100%.
not necessarily expect of yourself, but a lot to ask of yourself. So I totally can understand that.
In my experience, you have to be very unhappy with your situation to find the motivation to do that.
Yeah.
The tortured artist.
Yeah.
You really do have to be a tortured person to not feel the pain of, I worked 40 hours, let me do another 40. Like, you have to be completely numb to that second 40.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to
And then
break yourself
that's just, you're not even dealing with any other aspect of life. Like, I have a girlfriend and I try to go to the gym 3 times a week, and,
Wow,
sometimes
you're
I
more
should probably
active
cook
than
my
me.
own
That's
food,
crazy.
right? What's that, see?
Wow. I say you're more active than me, and I don't have a full-time job. That's impressive. You have a very full schedule. I respect that.
Yeah, it's a very full schedule. So eventually, the idea with the Kickstarter down the line is to have it not be a full schedule.
Open 40 hours a week for yourself to work on the game.
That would be the dream.
Yeah, and this leads in for me, and I find this to be a very important topic for really any guest or anyone that's trying to get into the professional side of the indie scene.
Right.
How do you feel about, and I'm not talking about Steam specifically, how do you feel about the gaming economy as a whole right now, as an indie dev that's aspiring to enter it and ideally, live on it and make it a lifelong career if you could?
Right. So I'm less cynical than most people about certain things, like.
That's refreshing.
But in a certain way, I'm also kind of hard on other devs because I've read so many articles on like, I released my game on Steam and I got nothing. And, they write this manifesto and then you look at their game and you're like, well, yeah, no offense. But yeah, like
I see why no one bought this.
Right. And it happens so many times, right? Or like I failed my Kickstarter and here's why. And it's like, well, that's fair. At least they understand why they failed their Kickstarter. But there's just so many things where people aren't, they're not putting in the work or they don't realize what they're missing from their work. So a big thing that was really important for me, and this is a huge issue, and I'm actually working on a tutorial series for YouTube. I'm still in the writing stages for it. I want to kind of cover pixel art for game dev for beginners. And it's kind of a mix of, design and pixel art sort of things and kind of setting yourself up for success. But there's something I call like the game maker effect, or like, I don't have a name for it. I don't know why I said I have a name for it, but it's essentially you look at a game
that now.
And you're like, that's a game maker game. Like that's like somebody's first game maker game. And usually you can tell it's just like, it's not that it's like ugly. It's just like the camera's way too zoomed out. It's like, if you compare it to a Super Nintendo game, it just doesn't look like that, right? So, or like whatever type of game it would compare to, it just isn't the same. So I'm really trying to, focus on that side of things and make sure it first and foremost looks and plays like a game. Like you wouldn't look at it.
That's very positive, by the way. I think that approach is the right way to go about it.
Right.
Exactly, because like it's hard, but you can only do like there's no point. Like you have to take into consideration the market. Like of course, even if you do everything correct and your game's a proper game, that's no guarantee for success. Like nobody's saying it is, but all you can do is put the proper foot forward. So for me, the Kickstarter is kind of going to be me testing the waters because I'm in a decent position where I'm living relatively cheaply and making a decent amount of my current job. That I'll have a good chunk of savings on top of my emergency fund, on top of what I hope to make from Kickstarter to kind of put me in a safe experience to finish the game to the point where regardless of what happens with it, it'll be done. And if I need to go back to work, I can. I work in IT, so having, finished a game solo doesn't look bad on a resume.
Right.
So I'm trying to do it the safest way possible.
So it sounds like you're going in with I have no eggs in this basket, but it'd be nice if there was something there.
Right,
approach.
Exactly.
Right, so you're not, it sounds like you're not entirely confident, but you're hopeful.
Well, you can do everything right and still get unlucky or whatever. Or
so you don't live by the make a good game and it'll magically sell itself theory.
Sorry, I'm not even sure if I believe what I'm saying about like you can get unlucky. Being lucky helps. I think you can counteract being like there's no such thing as unlucky. Like if you do everything right, I think you can have success. What is doing everything right? There's no guide on that. There's no guide on how to make a successful indie game. But there's certain things you can do.
Game Dev Tycoon.
You just get the sliders just right.
That's what game dev is all about. Just the sliders. And,
And if you research your past 40 products, you have an idea of what people do like for that specific genre.
It's beautiful.
We all have billions of dollars to practice this with, right?
Exactly.
I think Kickstarter is an interesting one because we previously ran a Kickstarter for a non game dev project, and that's sort of what really kicked off my career actually. Not because of the Kickstarter itself, but because of the validation that the Kickstarter provided.
Interesting.
So, a question to you, Grog, is if the Kickstarter does well versus if the Kickstarter didn't do well, would that set you off in a different direction for this project?
Probably. So the Kickstarter is kind of like if I can't get, it's hard to say what a moderate amount of money is. Like if I can't get, I'm not the type of person to be like, oh, $500, we'll get the Switch port out. And it's like, I heard Seabass say it the other day about a Kickstarter. So you're going to need more money than that. I'm not, if I can get the amount of money I would need to basically do 6 months of dev safely, then I would absolutely do it. If the Kickstarter wasn't proven, if I couldn't get it not too much amount of money, then I would push it off more. I would keep developing the product on my own time, with the 40 hours a week, because obviously it's not there yet. If people aren't willing to commit at that point, then something's missing. It's not there. I need to kind of regroup.
That's a very healthy way of looking at it. Actually, I completely agree with you on that for sure. Because if you don't pull people in there, what's the exactly going to sell?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not jumping into this, right? It's something you research, you have your plans, you have your contacts up ahead of time. You have a game, like I said, when I say I'm having a demo for the Kickstarter, it will be essentially a feature complete Zone 1 of the experience. So it'll be very polished, which is a big aspect of Kickstarter. It's make it look nice, get the hype there. But if you have something to back it up there, something people can play, I'm hoping that'll be beneficial. Hopefully, different outlets can play it. But once again, I have no... I'm not expecting PewDiePie to play my game or Destructoid or whatever, but who knows, right? That's where getting lucky helps, but you can't bank off that.
Yeah, no.
I got a random question. Grog, where does your name come from? The name Grog.
So, I used to play Phantasy Star Online for the GameCube. I had a dial-up modem in my GameCube, and I'd play it online. But before that, me and my friend were just playing it co-op for fun, and we made really dumb-looking characters, and we came up with really dumb names, and mine was Grog Space Grog. Don't ask me where it came from. I was in like grade 7. And then you start to play that game online for like 800 hours on that character, and you're like, well, that's my online name now. So I moved over to Final Fantasy 11 after that, and I truncated it to Grog, Grog, and then it just stuck. I've had it forever. And I go by Grog when I can, but you can't get Grog places, so.
One more question. There's actually an extraordinarily important question. The most important question we're going to ask you here that's very near and dear to our hearts. Maseta, would you like to take this one?
Yes. Grog, what is your favorite food?
I would probably say sushi. Just in
general.
Hell
yeah. Nice and easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. He's a variety man. Saying sushi is like, I love everything.
Right? You get the whole gambit with sushi.
I had sushi today. Good answer.
Now jealous.
If you had to pick one very specific roll, what would it be?
Yeah.
I would go with, is it salmon nigiri? Just simple rice with the salmon on top with a little bit of wasabi soy sauce.
Classic.
Just dip that in, get the, it's just so nice.
Ooh, yeah.
Second to that would be maybe a spicy, crispy salmon roll.
Oh, man. You're saying all the right answers right now.
Whew. Yeah, and I think that about wraps it up. Alicia, do you want to play us out?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today in this episode of Object Podcast. I'd like to thank our guest Grog for joining us today. Grog, where can everyone find you on social media if they want to find you?
So I'm at Grog on Twitter, GROG, confusing, I know, and on Twitch at GrogDev. Best places. Twitter has my links to Twitch and stuff, and the Discord community as well, if anybody's interested in taking a look there. I think that's pretty much it.
Perfect.
I'd recommend following Grog. He's going places. At least then you can follow him before he's the next Rami.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Object Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And we're on. Cool. So I'm doing it. Okay. Are we ready? Cool. Oh my god, hold on, I got something in my throat.
Let's keep that in.
We're good. Okay. Okay.